with no further ado, take it away, Dr. Afua.
Hello, everyone. Good evening to folks I met last week and to the new people new to me this week. I heard some of what you all said, and I'm really excited to be back this week and to hear and to listen and to share. Yeah, I heard you, Michelle, say you were pessimist. And I understand that because I can be too. But what I was thinking is, this is all that's going on is really a test.
I said that.
One of my previous therapists said that the universe always gives you pop quizzes.
Oh my goodness.
And this really is a pop quiz for us
yes, it is.
On a high level, on a deep level. And I think what we are called to do is to try to understand what is it that we're supposed to learn from this.
Yes.
And for me, when I think about that, it doesn't diminish the egregiousness of things that are going on now. I mean, and some of that is distraction. For example, big news is that the current president, he's still the current president, Joe Biden pardoned his son, and everybody's so outraged, and Republicans are outraged, and the Democrats are outraged. I think I said to you all last week that Democrats and Republicans are cousins. Did I not say that?
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought I did, but just in case I hadn't and or you missed it, the Democrats and Republicans are cousins.
Kissing cousins.
What's that?
Kissing cousins.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And so I'm listening because all these people, a number 45 who, is going to be number 47 is talking about how this is horrible. And, he's saying less, but his, those who love him, those in his tribe and pack are saying how horrible this stuff is. How is it that he told us he wasn't going to pardon his son, and now he pardoned his son, and this is terrible, a stain on democracy. And I'm like, do y'all realize who you voted into office?
Mm-hmm.
Do you realize who he pardoned? Do you realize how he set his son-in-law up to get over $2 billion contract with the Saudis?
Yep.
Jared didn't get that because he's the brightest bulb in the box. He didn't pardon him, but he is certainly, number 45, used his position to set his folks up, his family members, right? He is now putting forth the son-in-law, the father-in-laws. One who was, I think, indicted for some criminal activity.
Yep.
So the fact that people are focused on this and trying to demonize the current president, the man who is still president. Look, this is what I say. I don't care what he said. He should pardon his son. He absolutely should. And I've seen where people are saying, well, what would really be a good thing for the president to do is to pardon number 45. Now I'm completely through with these folks. If for some reason he's convinced to do that, I'm completely through with them.
Yep.
But who said it? They're kissing cousins. Don't forget that. That's part of the lesson of all this. I think part of what these things happening, and every day we hear about stuff that's just so outrageous. All of these people that are being put forth for very important offices and positions in the governing of this country are so unqualified. Oh, but I think in order to be qualified to be considered for these cabinet positions and these other kinds of positions is you have to have been accused and or sued and or indicted and or found guilty of sexual impropriety. And if you were a Fox TV host. Or maybe if you drove a car one day in a parade. I mean, it's crazy when I hear these people's names that are being put forth. And folks aren't saying anything about that. Their focus right now, distraction. Look at all these distractions we're having.
Yep.
Is that Hunter Biden is being pardoned by his father. Really? So, but I think for me, I was thinking about some of the things that I would want to present tonight for consideration and discussion. And Michelle had asked me to talk a little bit more about some of the international work that I've done and some of my knowledge about repatriation. So I want to talk about two of those. I also want, I think Dr. Patricia, you were talking a bit about the book We Refuse.
Mm-hmm. Loved it. Loving it.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book, and I've been telling everybody about it. I think it's really important that these folks are trying to erase our history from school. Mm-hmm. They're just trying to finish the job because most of our history is not in the schools anyway. And throughout our history, we've always been the ones who have had to present it. We had Saturday schools, we had weekend schools. I participated in some of those when I first came to Chicago because most people don't know the depth of our history. Most people don't think that we have been resisting oppression to the extent that we always have. And one of the reasons I really like this book is because it doesn't just talk about resistance as aggression or violence or, it's not that pigeonholed. It's so many things. And so one of the things that I would present for consideration, offer for consideration, and I think very appropriate since, Michelle, you told us that your born date, Earth Day, birthday is January 20th. Girl, that's got to be a day of celebration.
It is.
Also. And that's the energy, we got to do balance, we got to remember that energy because some part of the distraction is to make us get so caught up in fighting their stupidity that we can't give our energy to ourselves coming together, which is, sometimes that's a chore, it's really hard. We have, when we're fighting those folks, those systems, we've got to do that because that's part of the resistance. But there got to be these other points that we've got to have the protection. That's critical. And so you see in our history, like the Deacons of Defense. I don't know if people are aware of that group. And there's actually a movie that they made about the Deacons of Defense. So I would recommend people
watch that.
Watch the movie and read some of the primary information about them because they take liberties with the movie, but it's still a pretty good movie because folks don't know that. Folks don't know that Black people said, "Don't come for us." They don't know these people say it. They know some people say it. "Don't come for us. We ready for you." And Black people stood their ground, and the KKK were like, "Oh, because they're cowards. That's why they have sheets over their head." So, trying to scare us because they know how powerful we are. So we have to remember that. And again, think about what are we supposed to learn through this whole process of what's been going on. People putting number 45 back into office. People embracing the crazy folks that he's submitting to lead this country. You got number 45 who represents Jim Crow era and the enslavement, the captivity, the stealing of Black people. And then you got a daggone Elon Musk who represents apartheid. He's South African. His mama's South African.
Right.
The bromance, Jim Crow, and apartheid, come on. We need to be saying that because they're not going to tell you that and they'll deny. he doesn't represent Jim Crow. He doesn't represent those times here. And Musk doesn't represent apartheid. But when you hear him talking, he absolutely, that is where he's coming from.
Yes.
So I think one of the things that I would ask now, so that other people can get in on this, is like, what do you think the lessons are that you or we are supposed to be getting through this whole process of what's been happening here and what we perceive is going to happen? But bottom line, that number 45 has been reelected. Well, first time he stole it. This time he got it. What's the lesson for you, or what's the lesson for us? I'm curious as to how people are thinking about that.
Well, Dr. Afua, I'll start off. One of the things that I wasn't privy to, because I'm not a white woman, it was eye-opening to see how many white women would vote against their interest. That was very telling to me. I didn't see.
Okay. So you were surprised by that?
Because I didn't know. I mean, and the reason why is because in the workplace, and this is just my experience, I didn't have a lot of white allies. Actually, I had no white allies. I had white acquaintances, sympathizers, but no white allies. And so, from my perspective, it seemed that they had all the power under the white man, that they were just as aggressive in their careers, wanting to be in power, wanting to have a title, being rewarded because they are able to hold people back. And like I said, these are my experiences. So when I saw them vote overwhelmingly for a man who has just literally taken away a woman's right to choose, knowing statistically that white women are the average American. But the average American is a white woman between the ages of 18 and 35. Those are childbearing years. And so that was very, very surprising, very telling. And so that showed me that there is a level of weakness. Racism. It's within, the enemy within.
And Michelle, and Dr. Afua, I think as to the lesson, it's about speaking out. What came to mind was the poem by Pastor Niemöller called "First They Came for the Jews." I don't know, right? I'll read it quickly for anyone that's not familiar, but it says, "First they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me." So it's time to speak out.
Yes.
But in what circles? I guess my thing would be in what universe? Because I honestly think Sister Lizzie, that our vote was the loudest voice we had in the room. And now I'm like, who am I speaking to? It's an echo chamber, because I don't think the magnitude of their decision as a group, as a population, I don't think that they have fully understood the ramifications of what they just did. Not that they are not learning now. I was listening to a small podcast, and it was two white ladies, and they were relatively young. And one young lady, she voted for Kamala. The other young lady voted for 45. And as much as the sound bells were, going off about Project 25 and the Department of Education, they weren't listening. And that poem you read to us is just very telling, because they're coming for her. She
doesn't see it coming. I mean,
she sees it now.
I think that there's still a lot of people asleep, and that it's going to have to get really radical for them to open their eyes.
Really see it, right? But in this particular group, because we're talking about this lady was talking about the Department of Education.
Okay.
So they work for an education institute, and what prompted the conversation was the company had thank the employees for voting. Not necessarily who you voted for, but just for participating in your right as an American. So the young lady was saying that, well, you can tell the ones who actually voted for Trump, because they were hooraying, in reply to the company's message. Well, the young lady who voted for 45 lives in Oklahoma. And Oklahoma has already started some of the shenanigans of taking away the Department of Education, even before 45 becomes 47. Well, this woman's son has an IEP.
Mm-hmm.
Just had the IEP completed this year. Mm-hmm. So she's looking for the services for next year. So she called the school. And the school pretty much said, we might not have those services for your son next year. Matter of fact, we've really spent all of our money in the Bible and the religious curriculum. And they spend tons of money explaining the change in their curriculum for next year. So your IEP services for your son will more than likely not be available. So she called her coworker who voted for Kamala to get the explanation of what happened to her, because she's trying to hide behind policy and regulation. Well, they can't do that. They can't do that. They can't do that. He has an IEP. He has an IEP. Well, no. They can't
voted for it.
You voted for it. And now the reality of what she did is coming home. And it's too late to change your vote.
Right.
I want to add something. And it's an aside. It's not really directly related to this. But it was something I read in We Refuse. And it was about, she was talking about how after Reconstruction, or during Reconstruction, it was Black people who fought for universal education. And that universal education not only brought education for formerly enslaved children or the descendants of the formerly enslaved, but also for poor white people. That we were the ones that marshaled for and advocated for a public universal education. So it's ironic. It's just the irony of all of this. Mm-hmm. That here it is, you voted for somebody that's going to take away education. not just the special, the IEP and all that. They're talking about dismantling the whole education system.
Right. And it really is like a revisioning of history, to say, concerned that these truths that most people aren't aware of because they have not been included in the schools, but these truths about the racist institutions and all of that in this country and worldwide, if you want to look at it more broadly, that including them in the curriculum is going to make little white children feel bad about themselves. Because that's one of the things they said early on. We don't want to have they didn't want to talk about, the enslavement, the stealing of people from their land, issues around sovereignty. I just read today where number 45 is talking about maybe Canada should become the 51st state if they don't address things around tariffs. Really? People are talking about with the Ukraine and Russia that number 45 is basically going to try to have them bargain around giving up some of the land in Ukraine. We see that with Palestine. It's so much that's really crazy and egregious and against what the so-called founding fathers were about. People don't want the history because it will make them feel bad. Right. So people's identity, if we look at this, think about it from one psychological way to look at it. If your identity, your sense of self is reliant on the idea that you may be poor, you may not have a lot of money, you may not have status, you may not have a lot of material wealth, but by golly, you better than Black people.
Yep.
They're not smart. How you gonna say Kamala Harris is not smart? You may not have liked her, but really, the woman's not smart, the woman's not accomplished. Come on now. But if your identity rests on that, you cannot accept these truths about her as a candidate, about Black women, about Black people. You have to fight this. So, we talk about the fear that many of us have as a result of the election results. On the other side, they got a lot of fear of the truths that we know. You're saying, Dr. Pat, that we have been the supporters and promoters and have always worked for universal fill in the blank. The idea that everybody should have health care, should be able to take care of themselves or be taken care of, should be loved, should have joy in their lives. It makes no sense that people, let's go to women. Women are dying because of the stance against reproductive rights.
Right.
Women are dying, and they're going to tell us more and more, not being able to get appropriate and proper care, because the mother's life is in danger. So she needs to get a DNC or some other kind of procedure. And doctors saying, we don't know that we can do this. And hospitals say, we don't know we can do this because we might be sued by the government. What kind of world is that? So I think, and we talked a little bit about this last week about how strong a factor fear is for so much of what's going on. And that we have to just fight that fear. And there are people who are doing things, it may not be like 50% of the country, but there are pockets of people. And I would like to talk a little bit more about two groups for folks who are considering repatriation. Some have talked about going to Ghana. My godson actually has a program. He's in right outside of Accra, in the mountains right outside of Accra. And he has a company that helps people plan for repatriation. You know, we talked a little bit last week about folks are saying, I'm going to leave the United States, but they're not prepared to do that. Because guess what? We got our whiteness in us, whether we are visibly white or not. We got whiteness in us. This country that we live in supports and promotes, and a friend of mine would say injects, as opposed to us internalizing it, but injects whiteness. Whiteness being the idea around white being the foundation, white being the benchmark, white being that which is seen as the ultimate of everything. So we have our whiteness, and I've seen that when I've taken students to Ghana, and we've had Black students, and sometimes they call us Obruni, which means white, and sometimes they do it because people act like, Western world, entitled and all of that. And so this is Dr. Abadile. He actually works with people who want to repatriate to get their citizenship. So he and his family actually went through the process. I think it was 2 years ago. The president of Ghana welcomed, it was like 100-something people, 125, trying to think of the numbers. And they're my family. They went to Ghana. My godson, Dr. Abadile, he's been there for years. Now the entire family is there. And I was talking to his mother, who is a former president of Association of Black Psychologists. And she was saying that in this last group, they took over 524 people who now have dual citizenship in Ghana. So as a title of the talk, I was thinking like, where do we go from here? Those are the words from the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And connected to that is who we be. Who are we? Who we be? I'll use what would say is appropriate grammar. Who are we? Who are you? In the midst of all this, I mean, we got to be learning lots of different things for ourselves on the individual level, and also what we see as critical on a larger community level. And there are many communities that we are members of. And how are we going to be in these times? What I would say is, if we have fear, we need to connect with each other to talk about where their fear is stemming from, and make sure that it does not drive who we are.
Right.
That's really, really critical. And there are reasons to be afraid, and we've been here. We may not have been here personally, but we got cultural memory, we got ancestral memory. You read this book, but you don't have to read We Refuse. You don't have to read Kelly Jackson's book. Talk to your mom and your daddies and your aunties and your uncles, because I will guarantee that someone's going to tell you a story. I'm going to say amazed, but that probably doesn't really capture it. But when I start talking to people and they tell me how their cousin had to get out of town, and they tell me how the townspeople helped them. I tell the story I've written about my great grandmother, who she was like, what is it they call it? She was like the main station manager with policy. Y'all know about the numbers, right?
Numbers. Mm-hmm.
So she was like the grand person in Birmingham, Alabama. And they took away the numbers and policy. I mean, it was gambling, it was illegal, but they took it away, and they
the lottery.
Replaced it with
the lottery. Mm-hmm.
The lottery. So lots of Black people were working together, supporting their communities through policy, and they took it away. And now who really benefits from it?
Right.
It was kind of like better than the stock market.
That's my number
today. Yeah.
Okay, like what number are you playing today? Well, I saw 3 cats walking down the street, and I had a dream about. That's real, but I'm gonna tell you. And when somebody would hit, this is my experience of the numbers. So my mama had the dream book, and she was writing in her book, her composition book, all these numbers. I didn't understand the language. I guess she did. But when she would hit, or when people in the community would hit, they would always share that.
Yes.
They would always share that. Little bit, a lot, they would always share that. But I'm saying that to say that we cannot be reactive solely out of fear. Mm-hmm. We have stories. You have stories in your family, your direct family, your bloodline, cousins, or friends. They're going to tell you about when they resisted doing things. I brought up my great-grandmother because the police decide, the police know all this stuff that's going on, y'all. They know it. They know about drugs. They know about all this stuff. They know about all this stuff. I just had a thought. I'll see if it'll come back if I want to share it. But they decided, the police in Birmingham, Alabama, decided that they were going to raid my grandmother's, work. And so as people came to give her their books and, their numbers, the police started corralling them and said they were going to jail them. Well, my grandmother, she was the head person on a certain level, but she had a white man boss. Mm-hmm. And part of his job was to protect her and her people. And when the police decided to raid my great-grandmother's place of business, they talked to this man. His name was Mr. Henry. And Mr. Henry said that he was going to pay the bail for, the folks that the police stopped. And the police said, you don't need to pay. Calling her the N-word. That old Fanny, she got the money. Let her pay. So, and my grandmother did have the money because apparently she was a good business person. And so she wound up paying because it's about community. And she had integrity with her word. Didn't matter that was illegal. People are doing all kind of illegal stuff. So she paid to get all her people, make sure they didn't have to go to jail. And then maybe a month or so later, Mr. Henry came back to my great-grandmother and said he wanted her to work for him again. Now, here's an older Black woman in the United States of America. And she doesn't have power. I got all kind of quotation marks around that statement I just said. She doesn't have power. A lot of people would say that, right? Mm-hmm. She, coming out of slavery, she ain't got no power. So he said he wanted her to come back and work for him. And my grandmother had the nerve to say, no. Mr. Henry, I'm not going to come work with you. He said, yeah, you're going to work for me. No, Mr. Henry. My grandmother, she had the long, slow drawl. Me and my younger cousin used to laugh at her because we didn't know no better. She was country, No, Mr. Henry, I can't do that. He said, oh, yeah, he got agitated. Oh, yeah, you are. He called it the N-word. And this is a story my mother has written for me and recounted to me because she and her cousin were witnesses. And so after like the third time, he said, oh, yeah, you're going to work for me. My mother said, my great-grandmother, they were sitting in the kitchen, grabbed a knife and leapt across the table and put the knife at this man's neck and said, no, I can't do that. You didn't keep your word, so I cannot do that with you. My mother's yelling and screaming, oh, Mom saying, please don't kill the white man. Please don't kill the white man, Mom saying, please. And my grandma was really, she was tiny. She was tall, but she was thin. But she is one of those women. This is how I know, like our African lineage, because she used to walk through the streets of Fairfield and Birmingham carrying items on her head. She was a washerwoman. She was a domestic. But like we see on the continent where people carry things on their head. And so after she let him go, he ran out the house, never to be seen again up in that house again. So I share that story. Anytime I can talk about my great-grandmother, my mother, my grandmother, my daddy, I try to, because it helps mitigate whatever fear I'm having. It helps mitigate the notion that we have no power. We got power now.
Yes, we do.
If you look at the stories of revolution and liberation stories throughout the diaspora, if you look at what happened in Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, which is paying for the fact that, Mugabe has some issues, but paying for the fact that some Black African dared to say no to the oppression on the continent. But when you look at the stories of the liberating of Zimbabwe, which at that time was Rhodesia, what did people have? They had each other, and they had their spirituality and spiritness. And they were working, their weapon was their spiritness and spirituality and character and connection and community with each other. They should not have been able to do what they did in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. When you look at Haiti, which is also still paying for the fact that they said no to the French,
right,
and the British. But the story of Haiti, we need to hear about. We need to know. We need to listen to it, because it helps mitigate the fear that we can't do. What are we going to do? We got all kinds of stories and blueprints to tell us what we have done and have successfully done and can do. And, shifted because things change, in time, but there's so much that we can do. And we've got the stories, we've got the evidence. We don't need to be like other people who, in the face of the facts and the stories and the evidence, say that's not true. That's fake. We don't need to embrace that. And we also have to understand you can't dismantle the master's house using their tools. So we've got to connect with ourselves. And again, it may not be the entirety of our communities as we identify those, but maybe it's a Saturday school. That's what you do. Maybe from the time of the COVID shutdown to now, you meet on Tuesday evenings talking about one's issues, not just the facts, not the pain of what's happened, not solely. Because we do need to deal with the pain, and we do need to deal with the activation of things. I mean, I think one of the best mental health moves is not to look at this new stuff all the time, because it will continue to activate, not just for you personally, but generationally. Because, a lot of this is about what we've had to deal with generationally. You think about when something's happened to you, let's say around being a woman, and someone has what have they done? Disrespected you, assaulted you. There are all kinds of things that we've experienced. So if someone does that today, while you may have dealt with a lot of it, maybe it triggers you or activates you around something that happened 2 decades ago. You read all this news. I know for me, I have to be really, really, really diligent about and intentional about what I'm going to read. Because most of the time, if I read something, I'm like, this is crazy. That's stupid. I cannot believe that that's going on again. I can't believe that people are embracing these folks that are not at all qualified. You know, go get my 15-year-old cousin and make them a cabinet member, because he has as much going on for him. Actually, he has more than some of these folks whose names we're seeing. But I'm saying that to say that there are things that we can do, that we do have power. We could make one change. We could make $1, save $1 a day. And at the end of the year, we pool all that money and get something. One of the groups that I've been involved with, and Michelle's aware of them, she follows them, and I've been teaching with them, working with the co-directors. It's called Auset-Educational Institute, and they've done a lot of different programs. But one of the programs they did was around getting property. So their story was they had a house. It was underwater after what happened with real estate in 2008. The bank tried to foreclose on them. They said, we're going to take the bank to court, which they did. And they were their own lawyers. They worked pro se, their own lawyers. So they did a lot of legal work. And they found some, wasn't really loopholes, but they found some ways that Wells Fargo and some of these other banks did not do what they were supposed to do around the foreclosure. And they knew it. The banks knew it. Making a long story short, my friends actually did not necessarily win their case, but they did win it because they unearthed a lot of things that other people have used. And they were finally able to forego foreclosure. They were able to renegotiate with the bank so that their mortgage payment was now much, much less than it had been, because initially the bank didn't want to work with them with the property being underwater. Wow. And they now in that property. They worked with other people who had similar issues, and they did a community collective thing. And this is very African, where people came together and would put a certain amount of money into a pool every month. And at the end of a certain period of time, I'm kind of blanking on how long it was, but each member, there would be a rotation, and each member would get the pool of the money. And in doing that, they had 5 families that were able to get property free and clear because they had the money to buy it outright. We can do things like that. That's Kujichagulia, self-determination.
Right. Yep.
Right? And we can do that again. It might just be this group. It might be another group. If you look at Auset-Educational Institute there, and I mentioned this last week, that they work with children, youth, middle school up to high school. They are not accredited by conventional crediting bodies. They have 100% graduation rate of their students, and about 95% get full rides to go to various colleges across the United States. They are warriors, healers, and builders, and there are many ways that we can be warriors, healers, and builders. And for me, one of the things I think about in terms of what's the lesson is, what do we need to do to, really fight these policies, procedures, and people who basically are trying to annihilate us, and trying to make this even more a situation where the rich are at the top. Look at all these people he's, recognizing and putting into place. He's talking about tax cuts. You're not going to get the tax cuts that the rich people. Well, I'm making some assumptions. Let me not make some assumptions, because y'all might be in that top 1%. I don't know. And if you are, God bless you. But a lot of people aren't. That woman who has an IEP for her son, she ain't. She and a lot of other people are going to be really, really, really surprised, because they didn't think they were those people.
Yeah.
Did they think they were part of the 1%?
No, they didn't. They know that they weren't Latino.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
They could, because what they're hearing, this is, it's about fear. And it's also, I said this last week, my catchphrase is, he hated the right people and he talked about it. And so you may not have a lot of money, but at least you ain't you can fill in the blank. And so because people didn't feel like they weren't the issue. The issue is all these people coming across the border, taking away jobs that, let's be real, most folks here don't want those jobs. They're not going to be landscaping. They're not going to be at the fast food place for a long time,
Or the chicken plant.
Or the food processing plant, or picking vegetables.
Yes. And the political issues, the issues of the country, are not as simple as saying, oh, somebody from Venezuela, Dominican Republic, Haiti, Cuba, trying to come to the country, and they're taking away all our jobs, and they're just, come on, y'all. But that there's so much emotion tied into being better than, being superior. And they're going to find out those folks who they thought they were superior to, they may have that feeling, but that's not what's going to be operating in this country.
Dr. Ford, there are so many areas in which we have to, guard ourselves. Even before 45 takes office. I mean, over the last year, we've had so many recalls on foods, E. coli, salmonella, so many different pandemics that, are coming in, Mpox. There's a different strand in Florida. My community, I can say with confidence, we know how to protect ourselves from these vaccines, because that's what we have been supporting each other and keeping each other aware of, as well as any advancements in the products that we use. One of the areas in which I'm concerned about is making sure that our seniors can get boosters for, say, things like the measles, the mumps, and rubella, because I don't know if our whatever his name is, Junior Kennedy, if he's going to remove vaccines or not make them a requirement or a part of the vaccine platform or the immunization platform for children. But I do know, I'm 56, 57 years old. I had the measles vaccine and I didn't have a measles or chickenpox outbreak. But because I'm 56 or 57 and he's talking about taking away these vaccines, the question then becomes, should we be getting a booster for those childhood vaccines? Because here again, people won't be able to vaccinate their children, or they'll decide not to vaccinate their children. And it's already been a measles outbreak in several states across our country. I can just see that getting worse. But again, that's not me, that's not. But when you talk about my food supply, the food chain, then I'm a little worried. We don't have community gardens like Chicago here in the South. There probably are some, most of them are personal gardens and not really shared, with the community or given to the community. And I know a family that does not give to the community, and they have a luscious garden. We talked about, gardening in an apartment complex or in small spaces. But when you're trying to feed your family, tomatoes and lettuce and peppers and, just recently it was cucumbers, and it's in 23, 26 states that there's a salmonella outbreak on cucumbers. It's those things that I'm not going to say that I'm fearful, but I'm a little worried because you're talking about the FDA regulation when he wants to deregulate, right? And then what does that look like for us? So those are some of the things that I think about on top of, the police getting immunity, having a black son. I worry about that. One of the things that I do say about my son being down here in the South, which I have, really watched, the police don't kill black boys down here where we are. It's not an open season because I say a football. You don't want to just stumble up and kill the wrong young black boy and he's your favorite quarterback or your wide receiver just because you don't know his face, out without his helmet. So there's a false sense of protection because of that. They love their SEC football down here. They love high school, but Dr. Fool, you know how it is down here with their football. So I think that keeps them safe to a degree from police killings, that kind of thing. But, anywhere else, not necessarily true or so. So in all of that, like I'm thinking about the bigger picture. How do I really want to insert myself? What places I really want to insert myself in? Where can I be that I would be the most good? I can give back the most of my time, my talent, and my time when I have one. Where would I be? How do I benefit? Um, and if my decision is to repatriate, making sure that I still have my home here in the Americas, but understanding that I'm going to be able, giving up some of my creature comforts, being an American. I do understand that as well. But what I wanted was Justin is our social media coordinator. And he's a young person, right? He's the youngest person in this room. Okay. He's a Black man, entrepreneur, world traveler, social media coordinator, a dancer, a damn good dancer. And he performs around the world.
Okay.
What happened to my... Okay, there we go. Here we go. I don't know. That's the enemy. Some negative forces. But I really wanted Justin's voice in the room because, he has a future that's going to be a little bit different than what I've
ours. Right. Because he's got more life to live. I mean, I think Justin's like 30. So what's his life going to be like for the next 50 years, 50, 60 years? I'm 68. So, I'm hoping I get another 30. I'm hoping I get another 30. But yeah, so what do we do to, at this juncture? What do we do at this juncture? I remember when we first started this group, one of the things we said was what we're going to remember out of everything that we've done or that we learned, or how, one of the things that's going to come up when we look back at this phase, we're going to say, how did you show up for your community? And that was a driving force in how we conducted ourselves as we strive to survive and thrive, not just survive during COVID. How do we show up for our community? And I think the same thing, we're at the same juncture again. We're hit with, one of the benefits is that we do have this community. It's a community of people that every Tuesday night, anywhere between 15 and 19 of us gather. We're going through something as a community. And the question is, how do we show up for, not only for this community, but for the communities that are represented by the people in this room, your own individual beloved communities. How are we going to show up for each other and for them? And I'm going to admit, I don't have all the answers for all of this, but one of the things, I love the question that you started this out with, Dr. Afua. What lessons are we learning in all of this? And we're still, we're learning those lessons. The lessons that we're learning about resilience and strength and how to access them. So maybe this Christmas, as you gather, or this holiday season, as you gather with your people, with your beloved community, maybe we intentionally turn the conversation to the stories of strength and resilience, and listen to them, and let that buoy us or speak to us or speak to our spirit. How did we survive? Because clearly we survived something. We are here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we survived something that allowed for us to be here at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Doctor, I wanted to piggyback off that real quick.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the lessons that it's hard to grapple with, personally at least, and it really shines what you're just saying, that you've essentially been here before, but you have been here before fighting for these sort of injustices in order for the people of my generation and age to be able to thrive and not have to survive in tandem. And it's shown me that history is just repeating itself, just at an evolved state. So we're going through essentially the same exact things that we've already been through culturally. They just have a different face because of the specific times that we're in now. They don't have the sheets over their faces. They're telling us, they're playing in our face verbally and visually and deliberately. They're not behind sheets. They're not behind even cameras or phones anymore. And the things they're saying are as blatant as you can possibly be. And we're seeing that there's no sort of comeuppance for any of that. And it's damaging as a developing for anyone, but as a developing young person who is in a competitive field, or is, I walk down the street and see other 30-year-old white men who look like me, or River North, who get to go to their office and never be questioned if they're delivering lunch or not, even though they have a badge on their hip, or they never have to walk out the house and their neighbors say, "Oh, are you DoorDash? No, you've lived next to me for 6 years. So I've actually been here longer than you, but you don't know my name, Steve."
Mm-hmm.
But, or Jack, whatever the case may be. And you have to, it's like defending yourself while also trying to further yourself puts you behind the people that you have to go against culture with already. So I'm not only trying to thrive, but at the same time survive and do it in a way that looks different than my mom, or look different than my sister, who's 19 years older than me. Like, things that she's gone through are still prevalent that for me, but they just look different, A, because I'm a male, and B, we're in 2024 and not 1994. But yet this principal issue is still the same thing that the generations have gone through already. Yeah, we've had a Black president. Yes, we've made progress, but we've made progress in certain ways where we have the ability to even run. And then the epicenter of that is winning the championship of becoming president or being that face for politics. And but then we revert back to what everything was built on. And it's like, well, what was that, for none? Or it's not for none because it's giving Joshua, my nephew who's 5, a visual that he could be president, or that he can go to be in these same spaces that Peter, Paul, and Pam get to go to. Just because they're of a certain color, that doesn't mean that he doesn't deserve to be where they are as well. So we have to both learn our history and then unlearn the BS or unlearn what, they're feeding us through society, and actually unlearn some things that the older generations have taught us, because again, you might have gone through it, but we have to go through it in a certain different way on top of what's already came before us. And if we're forward thinking people, then that induces a different level of anxiety, because you don't know what you don't know, and what you do know, you have to challenge and or reteach yourself and or implement into a society that's not necessarily congenial to like how you want to move and how you deserve to move, because you have to watch your back every single step of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Is where I'm at.
I say, very powerful, and thank you for giving that. Where was I the other day? And you start talking to people because there are a lot of things to talk about. And this woman was saying, you can't have a testimony without a test. I think that part of what we're going through here, as I see it, again, this is how I'm looking at this. This is a test. We get tests a lot of times. The universe gives us pop quizzes. And it really is calling for us to be clear about who we are. When I taught this in class, I talked about these 3 important questions from the African world. First question is, who am I? And from an African worldview, who am I is not just individual. The individual is within community. So when you're saying, who am I? You're talking about yourself as individual, as well as that self-grounded within the community. So, some of you may be familiar with the proverb, I am because we are, therefore I am. That one's identity is necessarily, again, from this perspective and worldview, necessarily connected to community. The second question is, what is my purpose? And the third question is, am I living my purpose? Variations of that. Am I being true to my purpose? Am I doing what I'm supposed to do? And if not, why not? I'm just, I love the idea. And this is really critical and important. You don't have to be someone like a Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to have an impact on people.
Right.
And so you're saying about the 5-year-old nephew?
Yes.
Joshua?
Yes.
You might be the most important person
in his
for
life.
Joshua becoming the person who we would hope that he would be within the community.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the way you're talking and what you're seeing and your understanding and ideas. So I think it's also, there are a lot of things, as you're saying, we need to learn, and we also need to unlearn some things, unlearn some stories that do not serve us, that do not do us justice. I think a lot of times, I think about how much time I have sometimes spent so much energy and time talking about what other people have been doing, what other people have done, how egregious these people are. Well, this is accredited to Maya Angelou. When people tell you who they are, when they show you who they are, believe them. That's a gift. Believe them. That's a gift. And if you know that's who they are, then you don't have to spend a lot of time belaboring what they've done and what they did, what they've done, and who they are, because you know who they are. And knowing who they are, then you can better arm yourself, talking about being warriors, healers, and builders, arm yourself to do what needs to be done for you, family, communities.
Right.
I don't think I heard anybody say any, when I was growing up, they say bad words. So I'm not going to say a bad word, but I'm going to use abbreviations.
Okay.
Somebody is an MF. Why waste your time dealing with the fact that they're an MF? You have to deal with some of their actions and all, but you don't just keep saying, they did that, they did that, they did that. if you know that, then you can release that energy from them and use it to serve you and your community. That's part of where our power is. We have all these stories. You may not have them, but then you ask other people. We have at Sweetwater Foundation, we have a lot of elders that come. They come to Sweetwater. Our elder of elders is a 97-year-old Black woman who has lots of stories about her neighborhood, which was seen as a throwaway neighborhood. She has fabulous stories. We have people coming to the neighborhood. It looks different because it looks like it's alive. And before it looked like it was dying. And people are fascinated and they come and talk to us and we talk to them. I don't really have to harvest and all that because, I'm an elder too. But, and I do that. But the thing is, there's a space and there are roles for all of us. Right. So, Michelle, you talked about the salts on our food. That's real serious. What can we do? Well, I tell you, when people come to Sweetwater Foundation and they come and they see the gardens, community gardens, and they see the farms, they remember because that's what they did before. That notion, people may be familiar with the proverb is from the Tree language in Ghana, Sankofa. It means basically going back to fetch that which we knew before. And people say it in different ways, but folks know about growing food. But somehow we caught this idea that that's not something we would do. If we really made it, then we don't have to be on the farm because that's city. I mean, that's country. I don't do that. Everybody needs to know how to grow food because that's the only food you're going to really be able to trust. And people have that memory. So absolutely right, Michelle. That's scary. I was reading something today about, I wasn't understanding what the headline meant. They said something about engineered meat. And so I was like, oh, are they talking about something like Beyond Food and what's the other one? Impossible. No, they're talking about taking the cells of animals
and cloning it and growing it
to make meat. That kind of scary to me.
Yeah, it is scary.
And then it'll get to the point they won't have to tell you that that's what they've done.
Exactly.
So that's why
it's a regulation.
That's right. That's why it's important because we can do things, you can grow. I've grown eggplant in the house in the wintertime.
With a light.
I didn't even have a light. It was just growing. I was like, ooh, I like the plant. Let me see what happens. There's so much we talk ourselves out of being able to do when in fact we can.
Right.
That for me is a big example of that. I mean, y'all can't see my house but the plants allow me to live in this house. And I have propagated so many plants off of one big old mother plant in there. That for me is a metaphor for what we can do. We start with one and we propagate, and then we share those cuttings. And then that cutting, kernel of knowledge, gardening, protecting, whatever it is, it starts to grow. And then we say, oh, we can make more. And you cultivate that. So one of the things we've done is Sweetwater's, we do, the 12-year-old daughter of the co-directors has what she calls the prop shop. And she propagates different plants. A lot of these plants came from this mother plant that's in there that looks like a tree. I never knew coleus could be like a tree, but it is. And for me,
you all sell seeds, Dr. Ford?
We're saving seeds, and we might at some point start to sell them because that's really critical too. If you know how these big companies like Monsanto, what they do is they give, they sell the seeds to the farmers. They're genetically modified. And then So they're genetically modified, which means you got to get new seeds the next season and the next season. And the way nature operates, nature doesn't operate like, oh, these seeds can only stay here. They get blown and all that. If Monsanto finds out that you're using some of their seeds and you didn't buy them from them, they can sue you. It's the craziest thing, but the whole thing with farming has been crazy. We got Black farmers that are trying to do the right thing and give us good food and steady losing farmland. So there are a lot of places where we need to be fighting or resisting. I'm saying resisting in the various ways, some of them outlined with in the book, We Refuse. And there are other ways probably too. But I think for me, one of the real interesting things, and we mentioned it last week, I think it's a notion of knowing that there are options, knowing that there are things we could do, changing what we say about our identity. So we don't say we can't do this, we don't have power. We say we can do this, and we have done it. And let me show you and share with you how we have done it and how we do it, so that people now open their minds to the reality that we have power. Even with number 45 being in office, we have power, and we've had power. We've fought worse battles than what we're going to face here. And we have thrived, and we have prospered, and we have to figure out how to keep that going. And we have to be really honest and true. We have to be true about who we are. We have to be true about people around us. Your skin folk ain't always your kinfolk.
Oh, I had that yesterday.
Right.
And we got to be
know who our
clear
allies
about that.
are. You got to know who our allies are. That is very true, for real. Skin folk ain't always kinfolk.
Right.
And sometimes they can be not of your color, but do be of your kind. So, but you got to know.
But you have to know.
And you can't be blinded. You can't be blinded.
Right.
Because
and that's one of the lessons that I think I've learned in this. My eyes got opened. Because I was in my own bubble, thinking that I lived in a world where, I could kind of count on the goodness of the corpus, the masses. And not that it was post-racial, but just the belief in the better angels that they would come out. And I'm like, and Derise, I've been through a whole bunch of stuff, like Chicago school and
right,
all of that, and I'm back in that same, like, it's a remembrance of that time, that there are people who were allies, who are not of my color, but definitely allies. But so where do we go from here? And I'm not saying that my solution is the solution for everybody else. I will say that it's important to take an assessment of what it is that we do have. We have stories of strength and resilience. We do an assessment of our strengths. What do we have going into this? We have this space. I am committed. Because at one time I was thinking, we'll probably, we'll probably wind this down. Now I see that, okay, I don't know why, but we won't be winding this down anytime soon. This is a platform and a space for us to speak our truth, and it's a safe space. And I think we need that. And this space will be here for the interim, for however long it needs to be here. I think the other question is how to be an ally to each other during this time, how to be true allies. When we talk about communal living, collective economics. What can we do to collectively move ourselves forward? I mean, there's going to be a lot of things that we will have to be concerned about. I hear you, Michelle, when you talk about the food. So what are you doing? I mean, I've started collecting some canned goods so I can, because I don't can, but, I'm collecting a few, some canned goods just to have some stuff on my pantry, so I know I can eat for a couple of weeks in case the longshoreman strike really does. Where am I going to get my fresh vegetables? I'm identifying where there's a couple of, I looked up Sweetwater Foundation. So I looked up that. I know that there's growing homes, and I'm looking up the different places in our community where they're growing food. I've got nice windows and a nice space in my apartment that gets lots of sunshine. So I'm thinking about what can I do here to grow food in my house. Because, while I might have canned foods, it'd be nice to have some fresh food available. And there's things you can do with tubing and all kinds of, like PVC pipe, you put the little, and it actually looks kind of cute when the stuff starts growing,
Very satisfying.
Yeah.
It's giving life. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, you can do vertical farming on terrace if you have a terrace.
Yeah. So,
do aquaponics.
Go ahead.
So as we move towards, the next few weeks, it may be time to start implementing some of those things into our lives. Seriously.
Yeah.
So, Doctor, one of the things that I think we should do is try to put together some resources for our community members in the states that they live, in the cities that they live, and we can identify fresh food sources, local farmers, that kind of thing. So you have a resource guide.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about our history, right? Yeah. And when I'm thinking about our history, I get a little teed off. I do. Because I'm down the street from Tuskegee University. We should have had a Black grocery store 100 years ago that we still should be working with, right? But we didn't take that route. The hospital is closed, but there's still an agricultural school. Right.
And maybe the lesson in all of this really is to get back to institution building, because we have not done that.
Absolutely. And I would even challenge that. I'm thinking, for example, if you know the history of Aya Educational Institute, Afia and Wakesa actually did have a Black grocery store. They are all about institution building all day, every day. And I think you hit the nail on the head. When we talk about the education system and we talk about how it does not do for us what we needed to do for us, that's because we're relying on a system that was never meant for us. It was not meant to help us thrive, prosper, and grow. There's a book.
Even though we started it.
We started it. A Black man was responsible for what is it? The CSAs? Black man started that.
What CSAs?
Community, what is it? Community, help me, y'all.
CSA.
It's the ones where you get together and get these like
groceries. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right. There's a Black man whose name I cannot
co-op.
Right now.
Co-op.
Yeah. Food co-ops.
Food co-ops.
Especially in the summertime. So, you'll get a certain number of boxes of food. The community, what's the S part? Agriculture. Community supported agriculture. I can't remember what the S is, but that was started by Black men. So much of when we think about the things that we want to see in our educational system, that was in play with the schoolhouses that really came out of the work of people in HBCUs. But we also understand that in many ways, the HBCUs have not been ours in the way that we want them to be. That it's been very political. There are things you have to do that might be contrary, things that we might want to teach where we would get the message, no, you can't teach that because fill in the blank. It's not appropriate. It's going, you need to wait. I mean, it's all kind of things but I think, again, if we talk to people, if we read different things, we'll understand that the things we say we should be doing, we have done at some point. So part of it is learning that we have done it. Whenever we say, why didn't we do this or why don't we do this? I always say, oh, we did or we have. And then the next thing is to wonder why it didn't happen, why it hasn't been ramped up. Dr. Patricia, as you're saying, what has gotten in the way? Because that's really critical too. What we're talking about is doing an assessment of the situation. Who are we? What's our purpose? What do we want? What do we need? Are we getting it? If we're not, what has been the problem? Because you have to do an appropriate assessment to have an effective intervention, right?
Right. That's true.
And so that's part of what we're talking about. And people have different roles around that. The idea of having the resources is critical. And if you don't know someone, say where you are, Michelle, are there people in the rest of our networks who know somebody? Because I can tell you, like the Emmanuel Pratt, he's co-director of Sweetwater Foundation. Emmanuel he knows some of everybody around the world. It's crazy.
Who he knows, right? I was looking up his name. I know that name. I know him.
He's a MacArthur genius.
Yes.
And he not pretentious at all. You would see this man and not know who he is. But when you talk to him, you know who he is. You would know what he stands for. So many community gardens and spaces, you have to be a member. You have to live in that community or else you can't pick the food. I always tell people, if you needed to make a pot of collard greens at like 9 p.m. at night and you didn't have enough, you could go to the garden and pick it because anybody can. That's how he is. That's his vision. That's his purpose. And that's what he's working on. And that's what he lives. That's what that group lives. It is an institution that he is developing outside of a lot of these political structures. As a result, he does not get the kind of money that other people around here in Chicago get for doing much less. They get millions of dollars. He goes and we pick up pallets and make furniture and give it to people. We have resources. And, if Lizzie, wherever you are, there's not something you need, but where Michelle is, she might know someone who knows someone in your area and can connect you. And I think that's a part of what we need to do. And what are these pop quizzes coming to us from the universe? Trust. That's a big one. Trust. We have got to trust each other. We have been given many reasons to not trust each other. We got to find ways to trust each other. Otherwise, we're not going to work with each other. We're not going to help each other. And one of the results of that is that people can then kind of fuel that. Oh, you can't trust that woman. You can't trust that person. You can't trust that Black. You can't trust this and that and this and that. And then our strength and power in numbers gets diminished or demolished. Because now we're in a space that we don't trust some of the people we need to trust. And we've been taught to trust those that we should not trust. It's work. But we got to do it because it's not just about me or you individually. It really is about the generations to come.
Right.
Also, right. I should say not just, it's also, yeah. So I wanted to just mention two other things before we get off, and I don't know what the time is like, but the first one is I would, whatever you're thinking about doing in terms of, where do you go from here? Whether you are thinking you want to repatriate somewhere or stay here. I would invite people to go to, I guess I could type it, a bbtoomey.org. But if you put a BB Toomey, and I'll write that down in the chat, my godson, Dr. Obadale Kambon, he has a whole, like I said, he has a whole business around helping people to repatriate to Ghana. And he's supported at least over the last 4 or 5 years, people coming looking to get their I'm sorry.
Citizenship, dual citizenship.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Citizenship, dual citizenship.
Can I add something in here?
Yes.
Okay. So, and I love the way you eloquently put it last week, because sometimes it's not necessarily about just fleeing or taking flight in order to go live somewhere else. Sometimes it's simply about having a place of respite, having another place to go that allows you to be, as a reminder of who you be, that's not defined by your experience here in the United States. And sometimes, especially for those people who have not ever gone outside of the United States, that is such a transformative experience to be in another country, especially in a country that's run by Black people. That is such, it's sort of like the experience. The way that I try to describe it is like, how can you describe having an orgasm if you've never had one? So you kind of got to go to Ghana and have that experience so you'll know what we're talking about. I'm just saying.
I'm going to call you offline for that one, girl. Pardon? I'm going to call you offline for that one.
Because sometimes, it's like, if you've never gone, how do you know? It's like, I'm speaking, people who have gone are like speaking Greek or speaking a language that's not understood or not, to really feel or to really know and to really experience it. So sometimes just having another place to go and say, okay, I'm not crazy. There's a real place where people really do respect and honor Black people, Black women, or Black culture or whatever. I think that's the reason why James Baldwin went to Paris all the time, because he's like, I can be something else other than how they see me in the United States. I go to Paris, to live, to get a different sense of self. So it's about respite, and it's also about, if you know that you have the ability to leave a situation, it also says something about, it frees you up. It frees the individual up. But it also says something to the people who are your oppressors too, because it's like, they ain't taking that shit, moving on. Or we got other options. And so whether, you'll figure out what it is, where being in another space will mean for you. Because when I think about the other space that I'm cultivating it as a place of healing and respite, not only for myself, but for other people who might decide to stay here and be a warrior, because they're going to need to have some R&R sometime, and they're going to need to have some place to come and clear their head and to be in a different space, perhaps to live in a community or an environment where you are, I'm a King's kid, 60s. I wanted to be in a space where I could be judged by the content of my character, not by the color of my skin. This is the reason why I cried so heavily the first time I went to Maui, because for the first time, for the whole 10 days that I was there, it was just this incredible experience. And that's why I kept going back and spending 3-4 months there every year, because then I could understand, we talked about cultural competence in psychology. Well, they practice that over there. And so the stuff that I wanted to do here on the mainland, they were doing it over there. And I wasn't crazy out of my mind. Some stuff that you and I talked about, Derise, they were doing it over there. And it didn't seem so odd or so unusual, the stuff that I was talking about. And so I would go there to get reinforcement for what I wanted to bring back to Chicago. And to have that firmness about it, that, okay, this is real, this is possible, and this is doable, and I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And I know I'm talking about this a whole lot of passion. Let me tone it down a little bit. Let me bring it down.
Why? Why tone it down?
Okay. And so I just think that you're right. I just think that we need that. We need those places and spaces. And so I encourage people, that's why I encourage people to get your passport, because you might need that at some point, whether it's for repatriation or whether it's just for respite or relief, whether it's for, and I love the way she talked about it in the book, We Resist, because she said that the idea of being able to take flight was a strategy, and it gave you power. Because if the shit ever really did hit the fan, you weren't afraid to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it hit the fan like that, you weren't afraid to go because you're accustomed to getting on that flight.
Yeah.
You know. But in the meantime, you talked about warriors, healers, builders. We also need educators. And that's what this space can be, educators, education. What do we do? The survival stories. I don't think we're finished with this conversation. It's 8:45. Dr. Derise, Dr. Afua.
Sister Belvedere.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Dr. Blessman, I was listening so intense to you, but I didn't hear where you said, did you say Maui?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't, okay.
Yeah. The Aloha spirit is real. It was the first place where I experienced brown privilege the entire time that not these one-off experiences, but the entire time I was there, I was like, oh, this is what white people get all the time. When people are actually working to make your life comfortable and, warm and accepting and, all of that.
Beautiful.
And just to be in spaces, when I went to Ghana the first time in '93, when I went to Tanzania in 2003.
Well, what you
stayed for a month. There's something, I am so glad that, for example, that Justin travels, because it's important that as a young Black man, he has a happy spot. He calls London his happy spot. But he's traveling to Barcelona, and I told him there's a Black expat community that's there.
We everywhere.
We everywhere.
We are everywhere.
And it will help, and it will help to inform when we see other ways of being, when we see other things, when we see other ways of. I think today I was talking to somebody. I can't remember what country they were speaking about, but they were talking about how they don't have homelessness there. Oh, somebody was talking about Abu Dhabi, Dubai. They don't have homelessness there, and the homeless people live in really nice homes, stuff that would cost us like $500,000 here in the United States. They have nice places to live in.
Okay, I have to come off mute because today on the news in Montgomery, Alabama, we're going down to 20 degrees. Yesterday it was 31, and we didn't have a warming center. And And the warming center that they opened is not safe.
We treat homeless people in the United States like we treat them worse than dogs.
Worse than
dogs and
dogs.
cats.
But the
And that's a
leaders,
shame.
the city leaders, elected officials, were hosting a party at the Riverwalk. The same Riverwalk where they jumped the white people, the Alabama brawl.
Okay.
They got the tree and Santa Claus and toasting on hot chocolate and eating cookies tonight.
Well.
So it's important that we hold on to our vision about who we be. I like the way you say it, not just who am I, what is my purpose, am I living my purpose? I like the way you originally phrased that, who we be. What was the other two?
Who we be, where we be, and how we be.
There we go.
It's so much. I just want to quickly say I'm reminded of this song, this old song, I think coming out of World War II. And related to, there are all kinds of concerns about allowing Black men to fight, bear arms. They said, how can you keep them down when they've been to gay party?
Yep.
You don't want people to know that they're not alone. You don't want people to know that they've been living in a very, very small world. Because as you're talking about going to Maui, Dr. Pat, I think about when you talk to different people around the world, when you talk to the indigenous people in Australia, New Zealand, when you talk about those, indigenous people, some people call them American Indians. When you talk to people in Hawaii, when you talk to people in various places around the world, melanated people, you hear the same story. You think that they are talking about your life. That's also a lesson that we need to learn, because if this is going on with so many people, and so many people have had the same experiences, then one thing for me, sometimes it's little things, the way we use language. That's why I don't use the word minority, because it's about, it's about your perspective. If there's so many more people having these same experiences, then we are not the minority.
Correct.
And that story does not serve me, so I don't embrace that as a description of who I am and who my people are.
Correct.
And that can be powerful in and of itself. Just in traveling can speak to some people who might not hear me, and might not hear what I'm having to say in the same way that they will hear it from him, because he's younger. And lots of other things. We hear things differently from different people. But each of us, again, has a role. If he's talking to his nephew, if he's talking to my goddaughter, if he's presenting something, it might be in somebody's MLW photographer. I don't know who you are, but I'm so glad to see you here in the house. But through your photography, you may convey what somebody else might say, but your photography expresses it in a way that gets them to choke up on another level. It's not, again, it's not just intellectual what we're talking about too. And that's why we have to have so many different people, allies and people we can trust, who are not just fronting, so that the information, the knowing, I'm gonna say the knowing, not the information, because it's not always the information, it's the knowing. The knowing may be intellectual. The knowing may be
intuitive,
emotional, intuitive. It is always in spirit. And so that's what we need to keep understanding, and being in relationship with like-minded people and people we could trust, because we got to do the work. And we can't expect, Michelle, you're talking about there's not a warming center and they're partying on the riverfront, as if that stuff didn't happen earlier on. It's the same energy. And so what are we going to do? We cannot expect, because they're in the system,
Yes.
we've been in systems, and we can talk about the systems, and we in them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So we
And
can't
hope I
expect
don't get
do.
right.
And so then what are we going to do, and how are we going to make things happen? And can we put pressure on them, so even though they're doing some of the things that we don't necessarily agree with, we get the money, or we get the space, or we get the something, so that we have the warming centers. We're going to need those more and more and more. Some people talk about there's not an issue with global warming and climate crisis. Absolutely. And we're going to see that more and more,
More and more.
and more.
Mm-hmm.
Two other things really quick, and then I'm going to shut up. So I would like, whatever people are thinking about doing, about where you gonna be, where you want to be, to, even if you're not thinking about repatriation. And Dr. Pat, you said I articulated eloquently, but I'm gonna give that back to you, because you raised that last week, and I was just kind of co-signing with you. And I think it is important. It's not just getting away from. It is intentional, like you said, rest, because you need some space away. I got to get away from these plants sometimes. I go to somebody else's house.
Yeah.
Because they be about crazy here, and they don't even clean up or nothing. They ain't enough. So I got to go away sometimes. So, not to, and I'm not, minimalizing the importance of what we're talking about, but it is that, you go away and you get rejuvenated, you get replenished, you are embraced. All of that is so important for our mental health. Two other things. A BB Toomey Casa, a BB Toomey is the site. And Badale has a lot of information. He's talking to different people. He's a strong warrior. And that's a good thing, because that's important too. But he talks about, and there's some people on the videos that talk about some of the things they thought about moving to Ghana, and some of the things that made it difficult. They actually, I think, have returned to the United States. But again, to be well informed, and not just wearing rose-colored glasses about what it means to go wherever you might go, away from what you've been accustomed to. That's critical. The second thing, and this is, it's always the both end, because, talk about, you can't use the master's tools to dismantle his house. And sometimes you can absolutely use those tools opportunistically, when you're clear about who you are and what you want and what you need, and how to capitalize that. So, for example, I remember after George Floyd was murdered, and all these companies talk about how they are allies around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what they're going to do. And they're going to put so much money into things. And so many of us said, that ain't going to last. They just doing that because it's the thing to do. They're trying to protect their bottom line, which is profits. When you know who they are, it's a gift. And sometimes this is strategy. You utilize the knowledge of that gift to get some of what you need. And you don't have to embrace it in a way that's going to tear down the community or yourself, but it's an opportunity. And so I'm not going to go into it a lot, but we've been having a lot of conversations in some of the groups I have around what's happening on this bull market with investing. And I would say that that's also something we need to be thinking about and talking about sooner than later, because a whole lot of people think a whole lot is going to change with number 45 getting in, and that's true. I think for me personally, and for me with some of the people I'm talking to in these other forums that I'm in, is how is it that we can utilize what seems like it will be happening, at least for a while, financially, to serve us for what we need to do. And so I would invite people to learn some more about that, because we're talking about generational wealth.